What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel and to another 3D model. This week, we're going to be making a post-apocalyptic weapon. So let's just dive into it. Now, it's been quite some time since we created a weapon on this channel. Back in early February, we did create that hunting knife. If you haven't seen it, you should probably go check it out. But when it comes to post-apocalyptic models, it's actually been quite some time. I think the last one we created was back in February 2023, when we created that zombie bus. Now, I love post-apocalyptic models, and to be honest with you, I should probably do some more of them because I enjoy them so much. Something about the horror or the dark theme to it is just always something fun to create. And I really felt like making one for this week's video. So I decided to jump online and look for different references, and I came across this awesome piece of artwork from an artist named Nikita Sipochov. Now, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but this artist created such an awesome artwork, I just really wanted to recreate it. Now, usually when it comes to models like this, I like to gather up a bunch of different references and take ideas and different aspects from these models and incorporate them into my own model while I sort of customize my own. Now, like usual, I really don't have a lot of time this week. I have some family stuff going on, we're doing some house renos, there's just lots of stuff going on, and I just didn't have a lot of time to commit to making this week's video. So rather than find other references online, I thought we would just stick with this one. Honestly, Nikita did such an amazing job with this model, I loved almost everything about it, and I just thought it would be a lot of fun to recreate. So, I want to give a massive shout out to Nikita for creating amazing art, and I will put a link to his or her artwork in the description below, so please go check that out and please go support their art as well. Now, like I said, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. I kind of set a limit of around 3 hours for the 3D modeling, and when the UVs were finished and the texturing came, I only had really around an hour or two tops to commit to texturing, so we're going to try to get through this whole process as quickly as possible. Now, don't forget, you can find this full video in real time, which includes the full UV mapping process, and you can also get access to all the working files. You can find it all on my Patreon page, which will be linked in the description below. So when it comes to models like this, I just find it, like most 3D models, they really look bad for quite some time until you invest more time into it and you start tweaking things and you start slowly adjusting your model, and hopefully over time it slowly looks better and better. Now when it comes to this model specifically, it definitely is going to look pretty bad for quite some time. We're just going to roughly block out the main shape. We're not going to worry about the details until we are happy with how the blockout looks. Then we can move on to more fun things like all the barbed wire and all the little tiny details. So to all the artists out there, especially the beginners, I know it can be discouraging when you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere with your model. And to be honest with you, I still feel like that myself near the beginning of the model when things are looking pretty rough. It just takes a lot of time to continue refining the shapes and keep working at it for it to start looking better and to start looking more like you want it to look. So for everyone out there that's just struggling with that or just feeling discouraged, just remember everyone feels that way. And all you have to do is just keep working at it. Try not to rush things, and remember, the more you work on things, the more you refine those shapes, it will look better. And the more you practice, the more you can make it look like how you want it to look like. So stay positive, stay motivated, and keep practicing. So I decided to start with a cube and roughly block out that blade shape. Now when it comes to the model or the reference, I'm not going to worry about copying everything exactly. I'm just using this as more or less a guide. And in fact, once I had a really good stare at it and I kind of analyzed the whole model, I tried not to look at it too much while I was actually modeling it. That way I can hopefully add some more elements into it that were my own ideas. However, most of them were ingrained into my brain from staring at it so much, so I more or less, like I said, just recreated this whole reference. So we're going to start adding edge loops and start just more or less blocking out the main shape. I always find if you rush the blockout stage too quickly and you need to come back and start reworking those shapes, it's just a lot of extra unnecessary work. So it's really nice to take your time in this whole stage. Try not to rush things, make sure you're happy with those initial blockout shapes, and then we can, like I said, move on to more fun things. So one thing I try to always do is just zoom out, kind of step back and take a look at the model. A lot of artists have probably heard that the silhouette is always important, especially for a model like this. If you look at the reference, there's lots of sharp points and it has a lot of unique shape to it, and the silhouette is really important to make it stand out and look interesting. Sometimes the easiest ways to improve a model is just by increasing that silhouette and that main shape. So I was trying to really focus on those really sharp points in the whole curve of this blade and making sure that I really emphasized those so it didn't look too plain and too kind of straight. I really wanted to make sure I was happy with that main silhouette shape. Sometimes I like to just think, if I didn't have any lights and I was only looking at the silhouette, could I really imagine what this object was? And if it kind of just blurs or kind of looks too plain, then your silhouette usually needs a little bit more work. Now, what I really loved about this reference was all the wires and all the little holes and all the imperfections. It looked really beaten up, like it was just welded together from someone. I had post-apocalyptic vibes when I was looking at it, but I also, for some reason, had The Purge in mind. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but it's a really fun, cool, horror, creepy movie. But I had that idea also in mind for some reason, so I decided to add a few other elements like Eat the Rich on the handle and a few other little things. I was just kind of thinking about that movie when I was modeling this, kind of picturing that this was being made for someone that was going into the purge. To be honest, I was really tempted on adding some hanging teeth that were kind of tied up on the handle, but we did add some teeth to our hunting knife in our last weapon video, so I held off, but that was something I did really want to add. Now, because I got through this one fairly quickly, there was a lot of other elements I wish I added to the model, and we will go over that later when we cover all of the UVs, but in particular, all the welding marks. I really wish I added a lot more of those. You'll see throughout the modeling, I added little tiny planes. I remember back in the day, I made a model and I decided to add planes on little edges that I can add welding marks to. I remember that worked really well, so I decided to add some of those elements to this model, and I really wish I added more of those. I wish we made it look like it was more welded together, maybe a few extra screws and nails and just other little elements. We will go over that later on in the UVing, but that is something I just wanted to mention ahead of time. If you are recreating this, I would definitely add a few more elements like that to make it look a little bit more pieced together, like it's from a junkyard or it's from scrap metal that somebody just welded together to create some sort of weapon. Now, this may be helpful for others, but I always find it's easier for myself to model things when I create some sort of backstory. So like I said, I was picturing The Purge while I was modeling this. I always find it's easier to think about where this model is coming from, who uses it, where it's being used, and all these little elements that you add into the story can really help kind of shape how the model's put together. And I always find models are a lot more interesting to look at when they have little unique aspects to them, like little engravings or little markings or anything at all that just makes it unique and stand out from other models. I always find a little story can help you think of those really cool ideas to add into the model. So enough of me talking, let's continue blocking out all those main shapes and we can slowly piece together our post-apocalyptic weapon. Oh, also, if you like these types of videos and you want to see more random 3D models, please consider subscribing to the channel. I did just hit 40k subscribers the other day, which is kind of crazy to be honest. I didn't ever imagine this channel would grow to 40,000 subscribers. So a really big thank you to everyone who has subscribed and helped support my artwork. And if you want to help me get to my 50k goal, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Alright, so here is the post-apocalyptic weapon in its finished form. Now as you can see, I broke this thing up into two different groups for the two different textures applied. And why two? There is no specific reason. I'm not using this in a video game or anything like that, so I'm not really limited by the amount of textures I'm using, but I always find it's good practice to do that. In a lot of situations, you don't have unlimited materials you can actually apply to your models. Unless it's for a movie or a pre-rendered situation, you can usually take advantage of that and have a crazy amount of details and crazy amount of textures. But in a lot of other situations like video game engines, you are going to be limited by the amount of textures you can use. So if you're making a model for practice or just for fun, I always find it's good practice to limit those amount of textures. So for a weapon like this, I thought having two materials applied would be a little bit more realistic. So I have one group for the blade and one group for the handle. Now, of course, how your model is going to be used is really up to you with how many textures you want to use. But like I say, I find it's always good practice to just limit the amount of textures you have applied. So let's go over these UVs really quickly. On the very first group, like I said, is the blade and all the little components like the barbed wire, the little screws. And I'm not using UDIMs, so I am using one texture set for this. So I need to basically limit my UV shells in this 0 to 1 space. So it's really important to take up as much real estate as you can to get the most out of your textures and your materials. Now, I'm not using any specific texel density, so you probably heard me say this before on my channel, but I like to give priority to the more important shells. So for example, these ones, they are the main UV shells of my blade, so I want to have a lot of detail on these components. Whereas the other little tiny stuff like, inside these little holes, well, they're not important. So I can shrink down those UV shells really small because it doesn't really matter if there's a lot of detail on them. So once again, it's really important to know this ahead of time. If you're working within a team, you can't always do that if you're following a specific texel density for your whole video game. So there's consistent textures throughout your game. In this situation, I'm just making this for fun, so I can give priority to the more important shells and then enlarge them a little bit bigger to get more detail out of them. And when it came to just making UV cuts, this was really straightforward. Because it's a knife, I just did one UV cut right in the middle so I can have two shells for each side of my blade. So the other texture or group is the handle. So all the little leather wrapped pieces, the tape, and the handle and screws. Now, when it came to the screws, I just stacked these shells on top of each other, so all these are sharing the exact same UV space, just to save space. I knew you wouldn't be able to see any repeating patterns on them, but I probably could have just moved these over a little bit, just to have maybe a little bit more uniqueness between these, but I decided to stack all of my screws, and then I made sure that all of my straps were separate. I didn't want to see repeating patterns. I knew that you would see them if they were sharing the same UV space. So I just simply cut those and move them aside. Now I had a lot of extra real estate to work with here, so I just enlarged them. But to be honest with you, I probably could have done a better job. Now, one thing I did do that I wanted to point out was I cut the inside shells or faces off. So these are only one-sided, and just the big reason is just to save UV space. Like, you're not going to see the inside of the strap, so there's no point in having that geometry there. So that's something you can do just to save on your model. Now, something else I wanted to point out is I did add subdivision modeling for all these pieces. So if you look at how dense this mesh is, I just subdivided it and I went with one mesh. Now, of course, if you're modeling this for a video game, you can't always do that. So having a low and high poly model workflow, so having a lower poly optimized model for in-game and using a higher poly model like this to create your texture maps, you would have to do some sort of workflow like that for a video game situation. I'm using just one mesh, so I just use subdivision modeling, but that's something I wanted to point out. There's a lot of unnecessary edge loops on this. So for example, all these highlighted edge loops, I could just simply delete them and it really wouldn't change the shape. And I would save on hundreds of polys. So I didn't do that. Like I said, I subdivided it and went with that one mesh, but it's something to keep in mind if you are modeling for a video game. You can't always just subdivide everything and go with it. So, this handle, for example, is quite dense. and I just wanted it to be nice and smooth and also really quick because I didn't have a lot of time. So that's how I prepared this model for Substance Painter. So all I have to do is basically apply a material to each texture set. That way in Substance Painter you can see 2 texture sets and we can apply materials to these objects. Now, one thing I wanted to also go over really quickly, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, was the other components I wish I added. Now, one of the main ones were these little tiny pieces, these planes I added in, like this one. And the whole reason I did this, it's just one-sided plane, and I wanted to add some more welding marks. I found it'd be really, well, I did this in the past and I had some really cool results, so I decided to do the same things, adding a plane, and then you can add some sort of bump you'll see when we jump into Substance to add some welding marks along here. And I wish I added more. I should have added another one on this side. Honestly, all along these edges, I should have had them. I had another one up here, and I added one on this side, but I should have added more down here, or I should have made them a little bit more obvious. I feel like it was really cool having that welding effect, and that's just one thing I wish I added to the model. I also wish I added a bit more barbed wire. As you can see, I have some barbed wire at the top, but I probably should have wrapped it around more to emphasize those sharp barbed wire pieces. I feel like it just would have looked a little bit cooler. That's obviously a personal opinion, but that's something I do wish I added more. Along with that, I was really tempted to add something hanging off the handle. I was thinking having some rope and some teeth. Now, in our last weapon we made, the hunting knife, I did add some teeth components to it, so I didn't want to redo the same idea, but that is something that I would probably do, or I really wanted to do. And to be honest with you, I should have done, but hanging something else would have been cool. Maybe like some more rope, or I don't know. I really have no idea. Some metal pieces, like some of these pieces just hanging off. Just something I feel like would have also added to the silhouette and just giving an extra shape on the bottom. It's just something cool we could have done here if I had more time to think about it. It's probably something I would have done. Also, I was really tempted to add some sort of like knife component on the end of these screws so you can, like, I don't know, use it as a weapon. Maybe stab somebody with the handle as well, or maybe something off the back. There's really endless things you can do with these post-apocalyptic weapons, but those are just a few of the components I wanted to add that I just simply ran out of time. I decided to wrap it up like this. Anyways, that's how I prepared my post-apocalyptic weapon. Now we just need to jump over to Substance Painter and we can start our texturing. And don't forget, if you're interested in seeing this full UV mapping process in real time, it will be part of that real-time video, which I will upload to my Patreon page, and you can find a link to it in the description below. All right, now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in that FBX file from Maya, and we can bake out our textures. Now, when it came to the materials, of course, we're going to use that main reference as our main reference. So I'm going to basically work towards recreating this model, but I did something a little bit different. Usually when I model or I'm recreating textures, I have my reference up on another screen, and I just keep looking at it for reference as I'm adjusting things. I thought it'd be fun to do something a bit different. I obviously stared at this reference for a little bit to get some ideas, but then I just minimized it. I actually didn't look at the reference at all while texturing this thing until the very end. And I thought it would just be fun to try not to be so caught up on recreating the exact same, reflections and same smudges and dirt patterns, and just not worry about that. Sometimes I feel like it drags out the process a bit more. Not that it's bad, it's actually really good to have reference up while you're working, but if you're trying to work really quickly and you're not too worried about recreating every exact detail, it's sometimes nice to not just have that in your peripherals and have that just to keep looking over at. So that's what I decided to do. I just looked at the reference, minimized it, and then I had an idea, of course, of what I wanted the materials to look like, and I just dove into it and just had some fun. Now, I didn't pre-plan this one at all. Sometimes I like to just throw the model in ahead of time just to see how everything's looking and get some ideas just to make the whole video a bit quicker, but this time we're just kind of winging it. We're going to experiment along the way and see what works or what feels right or what looks right and kind of go with it. So I use a lot of the built-in preset materials, a lot of the smart materials that come with Substance Painter. These materials are fantastic. They're honestly really great foundations to work off of, and I love doing this and just It allows you to work a little bit freely without having to build every material from scratch, and it speeds up the whole process. So that's what we're gonna do. We don't have a lot of time today, so we're gonna try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. I think I had about an hour, 2 hours max to get the texturing done, so we're gonna really try to take advantage of all of these materials. Now, another thing that can help speed up the process is not worrying about all the grunge and dirt. I like to save that until the very end. Just kind of get those main empty meshes filled in with some sort of material, and then you can slowly build up from that and add different fill layers and add some smart masks to add different dirt and grunge and other little small details. Now, of course, this is post-apocalyptic, so we do want it to look a little bit dirty and beaten up because it's kind of scrap metal that's welded together to create this weapon. So we don't want it to look too clean, but we'll definitely have to experiment along the way to see what works and what doesn't. Now, don't forget, you can find this full video, of course, on my Patreon page. There will be a real-time video of the full UV mapping process, the full texturing process and modeling, along with all the working files. So if you want to see this exact same Substance file and go through all those materials and see which ones I chose, all that will be available to you, and you can find it all on my Patreon page, which I will link in the description below. All right, let's start filling in some empty meshes with smart materials, and let's start texturing our post-apocalyptic weapon. right, and that is everything. That is the full 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this post-apocalyptic weapon. Once again, I want to give a massive shout out to Nikita Sipachov. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but you did such an incredible job with this model and creating this whole concept and idea. So really big shout out to you for inspiring this week's video. And I also want to give a massive shout out to all my Patreons. As always, I really can't thank you all enough for your continuous support and just being with me along on this journey. So thank you so much for being here and supporting my art. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel or check out my Patreon page if you want to help me out in a bigger way. And I feel like I'm a broken record, but of course, this full video will be available in real time along with all the working files and the 3D model. You can find it all on my Patreon page, which will be linked in the description below. All right, let me know what you thought about this week's video, and I will catch you all in the next one.